So it's finally the time. No more theories, or no more lies. I don't know what's the best. Let's go to practice. Here I have dear Alexei Grinbaum from the CEA Saclay. And Alexei is a senior researcher scientist in CEA Saclay with a background in quantum information theory. But here you're not about this, I believe so.
No.
No. His interest is in writing, or I like the word putting ethical questions on emerging technologies such as robotics and AI. He's chair in the CEA Operation and Ethics Committee for Digital Technologies and a member of the French National Digital Ethics Committee. And of course, he coordinates and contributes to several EU projects and serves as an ethics chair to the European Commission. Thank you to be with us, Alexei. He has books, but it's in French, the title, so. From the ones that I know, the one is called Robots and the Evil and Bad, and the other is The Talk of Robots, the Speech of
Word of Machines.
Words of Machines.
Word of Machines.
Yes. Okay. So, Alexei will do us this year's tutorial about training in AI ethics, and I will give the word to him. No more speech from me.
Ευχαριστώ, Christo. Yeah, one more.
I have to tell something about the typical things. The people that are remotely, if they want to ask any questions, they can use the raise hand functionality of the Zoom, or they can write something in the chat. So we'll pass it to the Alexei. Please don't interrupt him while he speaks. Thank you very much, Alexei.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks very much for having me. And as you said, Christos, this is not a lecture. So I'll start with what I usually put at the end of my lectures. So we start at the end. And at the end of my lectures, I usually tell stories. And this story from a biblical book that nobody reads today called the Book of Tobias, or Tobit, has a 16-year-old boy who leaves his home for the first time and goes on a trip. And he's accompanied by an angel in the story, right? He's kind of lucky. The way we, when we travel today, are accompanied by these things, right? A non-human agent who is traveling with us. And this Tobias is walking for a full day, and at the end of the day, he's tired. There used to be no hotels. He will sleep on the ground, and there were no showers. He will wash himself in a river. He goes into the river. He sees a very big fish, and he's so afraid of the fish. He sees the fish. The fish approaches him. He's frightened. He's crying. He was going to swallow me. He's going to kill me. And the angel who stayed on the shore, the angel is absolutely not moved. The angel doesn't say, trust me, I'm trustworthy AI, right? No. The angel says, take this fish by the gill first, then draw the fish to the land, then take such and such organ of the fish, take out the entrails of the fish, the heart, the gall, and the liver, and in the end, you will be able to make useful medicines. And suddenly Tobias is able to do all of that. And of course, this is a mythological story. It needs an interpretation. We need to interpret myth always. How come Tobias was able to grab this fish? Was it big or small? The fish was going to kill him and eat him, and now he is able to take that fish and draw him to the shore? Is that a big fish or a small fish? And one interpretation of the story is that this is about fear of novelty. Tobias had never seen living fish before. Remember, this is the first trip? He never saw a living fish before. And when I tell this story, in most cases, to various audiences, I usually say, wow, this is the fear of novelty. We have these new technologies coming up, right? And of course, people react with a lot of concern and fear. And this is absolutely normal. But look at what the angel is doing to overcome that fear. The angel is not saying, I work at the Hungarian Academy of Science, I should be trusted, right? No. The angel gives a protocol, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And at the end, there is some clear utility for Tobias. something really useful. And somehow Tobias is okay, no more fear, right? So this, I usually say, is what we are supposed to do when we put AI technologies in the world. But now I want to twist the story a little bit and say, when you say research ethics to engineers, they are full of fear. They say, oh my God, you're against innovation. You want to go slow, maybe forbid things. And we, as people who are doing AI ethics, we have this role of explaining to them that no, ethics is not exactly to be feared. And we need to operationalize ethics into 1, 3, 4, 5 in order to get to some useful result for the engineers. So this is what we're doing in various European projects and other projects. We're trying to operationalize AI ethics, which also helps to overcome this fear of practitioners and engineers that somehow ethics is all about control and limitation and what we cannot do, and you are the evil guys. Well, one of these projects hasn't started yet, so I've chosen to start in the future. This project is particularly important here because ERCIM is a partner, as you will see, and this is something we will do starting next year. We will do a project called the Eolia that clearly has this operationalization pipeline. We will select some AI research areas, we will create guidelines, and this is about ethics of AI in human condition and behavior, and then we will do trainings. And this pipeline is quite common to several European projects. There's a project called Changer, which is coordinated by Demokritos in Athens. There is a project called IREX, about which I'll talk about a little later. So a lot of projects are trying today to operationalize AI ethics, and this particular project will be focused on some of the use cases that you see here at the bottom, some of the research areas that you see in the middle. Of course, we cannot do all of that, but there's, as you see, there's a lot of work to do, and Eolia will be doing one of these things. And the reason why I'm talking about Eolia today is that ERCIM is a partner. So ERCIM people here, yesterday I think we had a vice president, right? You're here? Yeah, here at ERCIM. We need ERCIM to bring people who will be trained, and we also spoke with the Portuguese colleagues yesterday, and we're very happy to have ERCIM in this large consortium. So this is a project from the future, but let's now talk about the content. So here's a picture. What do you think? What kind of ethical questions immediately come to mind when you see this? And I'm going to do this one for you, right? But ask yourselves, when you see this, oh, she's looking in his eyes. She's so happy. She is clearly expressing an emotion, right? And of course, the robot is also looking in her eyes and expressing an emotion, except that he's not having an emotion. This is all an illusion. So there is this emotional contact which can influence the lady. She's so happy. But what is the role of this emotional contact when it's just an illusion? Can it be used to manipulate? One big question. Another standard question I'm sure all of you have come up with is when you see this, is, oh my God, this is not a human being, this is a robot. What happens to all these human nurses? We don't need them anymore, right? So they will be all unemployed. So what happens with the labor market? A classic question, right? There are more of these. Any other pressing ethical issues that you see when you on this picture, just when you watch the picture? Huh? Yeah, this is a completely marketing picture, right? So it's fully marketing, okay? So this is not real life. It's fully marketing. But when I see this picture, I usually tell people, I am shocked. Not because of the emotional theme. All of these are very important topics. Emotions, social impact, impact on the profession of human nurse. But something is shocking, Rebecca. Yeah, tell me. Yeah, so I hope everybody can hear you. There is a physical contact zone. Can you see the contact zone? Rebecca is a professional AI ethicist. You can see this immediately. Usually nobody in the room finds that. There is a contact zone, and she's not following with her eyes. She's going towards physical contact. She hasn't been trained to follow with her eyes. And the robot designers haven't designed this robot to stop before it touches the human user. So normally this robot should put the object somewhere and retreat, right? And if the robot detects that there is a contact with the human user, it should stop normally operating or moving, unless you have a lot of security specification. So for me, the shocking part is this contact zone. And of course, everybody finds easily the big topics, right, that are designed here to attract the eye. But very few people in real life, except Rebecca, the professional ethicist, see that there is a security problem here. So the operationalization has this purpose of not only letting people take the big topics that all journalists are talking about in the media every day, but also let us speak about these routine things that we need to do in a routine way when we're discussing AI ethics with engineers. So not to forget the routine ones. And of course, you know that of the routine ones, there are many. So the central document of European evaluation today is the HLEG, High-Level Expert Group for Trustworthy AI, document from 2019, and the checklist called Altai, assessment list published in 2020, so this was before the AI Act. Recital 27 of the AI Act includes a reference to these documents, so it's not, they're not obsolete, they are in the AI Act, right, as an operationalization, one-off. And you know, we've discussed this already, that the really different, what makes a difference, if you like, in the European landscape is that, of course, these documents begin with values and principles, and the four big ones are respect for human autonomy, prevention of harm, fairness, and explicability, except that this document, unlike the Chinese, unlike the Brazilian, unlike the American ones, which are very much similar, this document says very clearly there are tensions between the values and principles. And your role is to try to see where you place the cursor when you identify this tension, because you cannot have all of them. So as you know, Altai is quite terrible. The operationalization proceeds according to all of these chapters that you see in the middle, and it's like this, right? So 150 questions. And I, of course, have never seen an engineer or a project manager who's able to address all of these things at once. This just doesn't exist. So if you give Altai to your PI on some project and you tell them, well, AI ethics is this, please do this, they will think that you're crazy. It's too long. The point of the checklist is still there. I actually, you know, very often social scientists say, oh, ethics is not about checklists, for sure. Ethics is not about checklists only, but I'm in favor of checklists, because Altai's point is a bit different for me. Altai is a very long document that has it all. There's everything in Altai. And on each concrete project that we evaluate, you will probably be able to find 3 or 4 important, as we say at the commission level, serious and complex, or serious or complex ethical questions. So Altai is an enormous database of possible ethical issues. And our job as ethicists is to help the engineer to identify several of them that are really serious and complex about their particular project. So to do this kind of thing, we have one tool that I'm going to quickly show you. This is an industrial tool, so we're not going to do this exercise here today, but I'm going to show you the exercise. In different European projects like multi-rate soprano projects, we have a tool that packs these 150 questions into a tree structure that is hidden from the engineer. It asks one question at a time, and it arrives at the end at something called ethics readiness level. This is terrible from the philosophy point of view, I apologize, right? Of course, a philosopher in me has always said, and is still saying, there's no such thing as ethics readiness level, just because simple consequentialism tells you that you can never be ready. But this is how you manage a project, right? This is a project management tool. And this is, well, run into blocks. So we have these different blocks, Altai, AI Act, robotics, security applications, and so on. So various blocks, and maybe I should just quickly, for you to see how this works, show you on a, hopefully online people can still hear me. So I'm going to show you on a different computer here how this tool operates. Can you see this? Yes, I think you can see this now here. I'm going to make it big for the audience. Can you see that? Yes. So you see this tool is asking 1 or 2 questions at a time. So let's say it uses AI. Let's say it's not produced for law enforcement agencies. This is one version of the tool, right? Oh, yeah, I need a name. So what's the name? Budapest. And then it asks this very general Altai kind of questions. And what we intend here is to have this tool as a facilitator of the conversation between an AI ethicist and the engineer. We don't want the engineer to just sit before a screen and do an ethics evaluation by themselves. They need to have a dialogue. But the AI ethicist by themselves will not be able to evaluate it because they need to speak with the engineer. So we intentionally ask these very broad questions because they will provoke a discussion. Do we say yes or do we say no? I'm going to say no just to go fast through the tool. But if you say yes, you go on a different level of the tree and there are sub-questions. So let me say yes somewhere. Is it possible that technical design decisions will result in significant damage? Well, let's say yes. You see what happens with the score on the left? It says current score 4, you go to 3, and then you start getting sub-questions. And if you are good on the sub-questions, you get your point back. So this is, of course, very primitive in terms of ethical thinking. There is not much ethical thinking. We have worked on the numerical coefficients and scores and so on. So what happens is that you go through this kind of tool it takes about an hour, and I'm going to just say no to everything for you to see that in the end you get a score. And this is the kind of tool that, okay, this is going to take, you see, I'm losing points. I'm saying no to everything. I'm going to be really bad in ethics. And the interest of this point is that in the end you get a score, which is going to be really bad in my case here. And the score by itself means nothing. But okay, here we go. This means nothing in terms of philosophy of science. But the point is you go through the same exercise 6 months later, so you've discussed something with the engineer, right? They've learned some lessons. They have the output of this thing. You go through the same thing 6 months later, and it's supposed to be higher. So what is meaningful is the dynamics of the score. And this tool is used in several industrial design projects. So it kind of works. It kind of works, and this is the operationalization of Altai that we want to use when we, oops, yeah, I need to project now from here. Let me see. Okay, so hopefully we're back to the projection. So this is the kind of operationalization of this terrible 150 question Altai checklist, which is way too long for people to do by themselves in real life. So the tool is going to be published, but it's available. It's based on different European projects. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to look at 2 different trainings in AI ethics. And the first one is for computer scientists. Now, this is an 18-hour training course. And of course, we're not going to do 18 hours. But let me describe you the structure of the course. So we've actually run it several times with young computer scientists and not so young computer scientists. And the course is interesting because the demand for a general ethics module at the beginning, you see there's this black square, is coming from computer scientists. They say, before we start talking about AI ethics, please teach us ethics as such. What is ethics? What is research ethics as such? Before we start talking about digital stuff. And this module is designed as a first full day general ethics course with 3 lectures, with an exercise on moral dilemmas and with a reading exercise. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, you will know that this is the most difficult part of the course. I'll tell you about it later. And then there are 4 modules in this course structured by values and principles. This is quite unique. We've tried it once. It kind of works. So you don't do your course on historic theories in ethics or things, and it's not a course on ethics for XR and ethics for AI and ethics for cybersecurity and ethics for this or that. It's a course on autonomy and responsibility across the digital sphere, privacy and non-manipulation, justice and fairness, and finally emergence in generative AI and regulatory frameworks. We have to do that. So every module here has a lecture and different types of exercises. We're going to do one of them very quickly. So the general ethics module, let me show you maybe more details about this. The general ethics module, as I said, it has 3 lectures on what is ethics, types of ethical questions, an exercise on moral dilemmas, very classic. I think you've done it with Katrin here last year, right? Yeah. Concepts of responsibility, another lecture, and then this exercise, which is really difficult, where we give them 2 pages from Hannah Arendt, Hans Jonas, and somebody else I'm forgetting, and they try to read it, and they can't. It's too complex. So we actually sit down together and we discuss what exactly it is to read this philosophy of technology text. So, oh yeah, here we go. We have some virtue ethics texts, yes, and we have some dilemmas. So let's try to do this. This is an exercise from this course, one of the exercises. You don't have it on your handout, so this is really just on the screen. And while you're reading this, I'm going to try to read this for you. 1 second, I've prepared this. I'm not sure it will work, but let's try. Oops, sorry. So the dialogue goes, notice your scores, Elon, skyrocketing in the stuff chosen by the machine. AI is doing wonders, isn't it?
Wonders feels more like a straitjacket, keeps me in my lane. What about the subjects I'm not picking? Needs versus wants.
It's about efficiency, Elon. Metrics. The system's carving the best path for you. It's precision.
But education is more like the shotgun, not the sniper. Broad, not narrow. We're missing the big picture, aren't we?
It's designed for optimal learning. Keeps you glued, motivated. Isn't that the goal?
Glued, sure. But what about growth? Facing the uncomfortable, that's growth. This, what we're doing, is comfort.
Point taken. It's a balance, though. Personalization sends dropout rates down, keeps students in the game.
Game? But who's setting the rules? Shouldn't I have a say in the game I'm playing? Not just be a pawn?
Your voice matters, Elon, but you still need guidance. Education is bigger than just coding and algorithms. It's about shaping futures, yours included. So you see a bit of a pathetic dialogue, but it's sort of on half a page, summarizes some of the questions. So what we do here is that we tell people, so you're software designers, and then half of the audience are teachers union. So probably I would say let's just do software designers maybe all together. We're not going to break into groups here, although we are quite a big group. Let's do software designers. You need to formulate elements of an accountability framework, right? So, you see? It sounds like, you see what it's saying? This is, ChatGPT is good. It sounds like you're trying to smooth the discussion and avoid it. This was on purpose. I've set it up that way. Software designers. What I think software designers who have this kind of dialogue, and of course, they are designing the software that gives recommendations for following a curriculum. You know that this actually, you probably know, this actually exists in the world. What would you do here? Should autonomous learning systems have full control over personalized education? Can you define who shares the responsibility? Could this include AI developers, teachers, or maybe the city council that gives the app to schools? What do you think about responsibility in this kind of situation? Hopefully there will be disagreements, but let's see. Yeah, we just grab some mics, please, because people online will not hear you, and people who are online can also participate.
I mean, in terms of like who shares the responsibility, in the text it says developers, teachers, city council. I don't understand the city council.
City council is the official authority that allows the school to use this software.
I see. So they're deciding not
to. So the school depends on the city council. The city council says, here is software, you can use it.
I see. Okay. I would think the ministry would be involved, but the student...
It depends on the countries, whether it's ministry or whoever,
But the student is missing.
Aha,
the
interesting.
student is complaining in the other dialogue that they are missing.
All right. So what kind of accountability would you like to assign to the student here? Remember, these are probably minors, right? But it's interesting that you're saying, well, the system just gives advice. It doesn't force the student. They're choosing it themselves. So somehow they should take a share of responsibility. Interesting. Can that work? Anybody has a remark on that question?
I think that students should be proposed some choices. Something like the system asks, do you want a deeper look according to your score and so on? And which would answer with remark that he's kept in his lane, but he might want a choice. As for the city council, maybe it's done somewhere, but there should be, not only for Ellen, but for all students, well, most of them, ask them return on the experience. To make the choice.
So they should do like an experimentation or something like this with feedback.
Yeah. If you want a decision by the city council, it's interesting to know what the students have, how they felt.
Right. So yeah, interesting. You guys are very focused on asking the student, really following the student's choices, giving the student choices. Very interesting. Yes, please.
I'm wondering whether the situation is so much different from what we actually have already in place and had in place for the last decades. There is different types of school books being produced, curricular commissions set curricula, teachers select books, schools select books, parent-teachers unions jointly select teaching materials. So that's a form of personalization as well. Granularity might now be a bit narrower, but even teachers make autonomous decisions. And so basically, accountability, design, who is involved, who can complain via which mechanisms, these are all in place. And now we add one additional component to that, which is now software design. We had audio labs 30 years ago. We were playing tapes.
So you're
was recording audio, playing. So is the situation so different that we need an entirely new framework?
So let's see. Imagine you compare the publisher of a textbook with the publisher of this kind of software. Will you say, well, because this has gone through the choice of the teachers, the choice of the city council and whatever, as much as the publisher of the textbook is not responsible for this particular kid, or maybe is responsible, as much the publisher of the software would be responsible? Do you think it's comparable?
I think in terms of processes behind it, because software doesn't stand on its own, it's not being plugged there and runs on its own. It runs in an environment. There is social interaction. There is students who have their own students' unions. There is parents who have their parents' unions. There's teachers involved. So I'm just saying we have the framework in place to add additional components. It's not saying that the software is autonomous as such, because it lives in an environment. And I think we have the legal and the organizational mechanisms in place to incorporate it.
Yeah. So in that sense, before we move to the next one, it's a very interesting position. It says the AI developers, you see, who is responsible? It begins with AI developers there, will be as responsible as publishers of a textbook, more or less, right? So not because this is AI, somehow they become 100 times more responsible, because there's a framework, because there are many decision makers. So it's not that because the AI developers are not just publishers of books, suddenly their responsibility is 100 times bigger. Rebecca?
Sorry, Rebecca, before you start.
Yeah, okay.
Can you open the chat, because they are put some questions?
Yeah,
Rebecca,
we'll try.
They have some questions, little time now in the chat.
Rebecca, to you.
Okay, yeah, so building on this is also, this is on, right? Quite similar to systems that we already have, and I'm reminded of like in Germany, for example, where they have the 3 different levels of schooling and they assign children, and this is problematic because it reinforces a lot of social biases. Children from lower income families, children with neurodevelopmental disorders and things like this may be unfairly placed in systems that they might not want to. And if we have this AI or autonomous learning system, that I think it is equally likely that it's going to reinforce these kind of biases. For example, if Elon in this example is a child with neurodevelopmental disorders who maybe approaches problems differently, then they're going to be pigeonholed. And so this isn't really a comment on responsibility per se, but on like, how it is going to, a system like this is going to reinforce the social
the existing bias and the existing discrimination if it exists. Yeah. So what would you do with that? Knowing that there is the question of social justice and fairness, you sit on the city council. You see, this is the second question I've just hidden, but of course, you sit on the city council and you say, well, there is a textbook, okay, it's been written this way, it's been read by some experts, and we have the signature of the ministry said, yes, this is a valid textbook, go ahead. And now some AI developer comes and says, oh, I have software. What do you want to ask for?
Programmed the software, like what rules were being used to...
Yeah. So what are you going to do with that? So you're going to ask for an experimentation? You're going to ask for validation? You're going to ask for what?
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess from the psychological perspective, you could deploy it and you could be like, okay, we have one classroom using this system and another classroom using traditional learning methods. But then you would have to define what learning outcomes are. If you just look at purely learning outcomes, then this would provide an argumentation for the system, because clearly the student is doing better with the AI system. If you were to look at student satisfaction, however, as a different metric, this would be something else. The student is clearly not satisfied. So you could say, okay, the system is performing better, but then you would have to define what better means. Is it academic performance? Is it social performance? Also the teacher satisfaction, parent satisfaction, and things like that. Who are you asking? There are many.
So anybody knows what the AI Act says about this? And what the AI Act says about this question? So this is a high-risk application under Article 5. Education is high risk. So that means that the school, or rather the city authority or ministry, whatever we call it, will be asking for certificates. And Rebecca is absolutely ready to sit on the CEN 21 certification committee, because this is where they're trying to develop these kinds of certificates. And they don't really know how to do that because nobody knows. So you need to produce a CE certificate of compliance for this kind of application. How do you do that? Based on some metrics, some experimentation, but what exactly are you going to measure? Are you going to ask for more bias treatment than in an ordinary school without AI consultants? So of course, an ordinary school system also has all the discrimination structure and all the measures to reduce discrimination, right? Social lifts and things like this. Are you going to ask for more or for similar level? Or for less, maybe, right? So this is one of the big certification problems. Next year, this will come into force. You will not be able to deploy this in Europe. It's currently deployed in the US. I don't know any European example like this, but it will not be able. We will not be able to deploy it unless there's a certificate, but the certification process doesn't really exist. So somebody needs to go there and take part. And for having been with the 21 committee recently, I can tell you there are approximately 0 ethicists on the committee. It's all about lawyers and engineers. All right, any further reaction? We have something from the chat maybe before we go back to the room. In the chat, Yekaterina says, school shares responsibility because of giving a diploma in the end. This is very interesting. So you see, it's not just the AI developers who get a certificate, but the student gets a diploma. So what do you think about this? Should the diploma mention the presence of AI or not? Special experimental school, does it say that diploma, but AI trained student? What do you think about this? Yeah, Ferran, yeah.
I would say that, that's not enough, because the goal of a diploma is to somehow define a bit, it's valid when you know what they learn, but you have a diploma, which is issued by AI given course. You don't know what this person actually did in this course. So in addition to the diploma, I'll say that it's AI experimental, whatever.
You want the printout of all the work done. Interesting.
And for me also, I believe that it's the diploma defines that you gain some knowledge and not how you gain it.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you will have in diploma all the curricula of
and names of teachers and which textbooks and so on. Okay, so nothing really new. A diploma will be given, you say, anyway. It's the same diploma as before. So yeah, the school shares responsibility like for any other student. It doesn't change it. Okay, any remarks about it's actually interesting that you have not started with the teacher. We've talked about the city council, we've talked a little bit about AI developers, we're going to come back to the AI developers, but not so much about the teacher, yes?
What's the point of the teacher in this case?
Yeah, that's the question. So what is the teacher doing here?
Does the teacher take any, let's say, has any responsibility or take any decision? If the school or the city council decides to have AI in the class, the teacher cannot do anything. He has to comply. At least in my country. I don't know how much. This is mostly.
If the ministry says just let them go, they will just go. But why do you think we have the teacher here, in terms of
The teacher becomes kind of a supervisor.
Yes.
Just monitoring what's
Principle number 1 of Altai, and also in the Act, human supervision. You can't avoid it. It's there in full letters, right? So the question is, of course, how much human supervision? But this cannot be under Altai, this cannot be run fully autonomously. So this is something that some online schools in America are trying. It's not possible Under Altai, there has to be human supervision. The question is, yes, what is the supervisor actually doing? How much power? How frequently? And so on. Yes.
So, if the teacher is involved for supervision, then is the system fully autonomous? Because then the teacher should be able to take over. And then I'm sorry to say it, another thing that is going to sound a bit dark, but is the teacher's role then reduced to simply verifying that the students are not cheating? Are they really the ones interacting with the AI? And if that's the case, it's pretty sad.
Yeah. So is the teacher still shaping the future? Say the last line here. Is the teacher still shaping the future of the student, or the teacher is just putting their signature on the diploma, or like what exactly the teacher doing? And that's a good question. So what do you think based on this dialogue where the teacher is kind of in favor of the software, you see? The teacher is sort of arguing for the software. The teacher is kind of happy that there is the software for personalization. Why do you think the teacher is happy? It actually, it's written in full letters. I think you've noticed it. If you're teachers yourselves, you know that this is very important for teachers. Yeah. Why is the teacher happy?
Maybe because they think the design of the learning path is correct. Maybe they have been involved in knowing their students, what is good for them. And
Rebecca? Yeah, and Ferran? No? Look at this. Personalization sends dropout rates down. The statistics of the school will be better. You see, the principal of the school is probably super happy. Students will actually graduate, there are fewer dropouts, and the teachers say, wow, good, maybe we cannot manage it humanly, but the AI helps us to actually teach all of these kids who would be otherwise. So really here you see how metrics work not only for software, but for humans too, right? You wanted to say something? No, okay.
Yeah, but I mean, that becomes very mechanistic education. And it's because it's high risk, it means that indeed it should not be fully mechanistic. So
a very good point. And this is chapter, I don't remember which of Altai, which says social impact on society. How will teachers change as a profession? Will they become mechanistic, as you say? Just about indicators? How much humanism, you remember you learned yesterday? How much humanism is still there, right? And of course, this is something which is probably medium term or long term, but you already see it in this dialogue. The impact on the teaching profession. All right, so we need to conclude with this. I have one last question for you. Now that we've seen a lot of different points, you guys now are ethics experts. You're going to evaluate this project. So some AI developers have submitted a project for funding, and you are ethics evaluators. Now we've done the analysis. What are you going to say? Sandbox. Interesting. Sandbox with what? Just you guys declare, remember the sandbox regime, for those of you who don't know, Article 36 of the AI Act, right, and all the other things. So this chapter 9, the sandbox regime is a regime where some legislation that is otherwise mandatory is kind of softened, especially the GDPR. So you can use data in a much softer way with fewer controls under the sandbox regime. It means that it's an experimentation, but you have some more permissiveness. So you say, if you say sandbox, that means, great, you guys run an experiment and actually we're going to soften the GDPR rules. You will be able to use your machine learning on this data and train your system even better. That's an interesting point. You're really in favor of innovation. Thank you. I like that. So you are the ethics experts. You need to write your report, right? What are you going to forbid this? Anybody is going to forbid this? Nobody is forbidding this.
Actually, you mentioned the high-risk classification AI Act, but the truth is that beyond that, there is the possibility of the system inferring emotions from students. So it could even be prohibited.
It could be an emotional system, but so you need to check a lot of things, yeah.
Building on the previous comment on sandboxes, sandboxes are still to be
Design. We don't have them yet. Yes.
And so
you're right.
one thing is precisely trying to embed in sandboxes frameworks for the assessment of responsible AI. So of course this debate.
Yeah, but you guys are ethics evaluators here now, right? So they've applied for 5 million euros. They went through scientific evaluation, excellent, good project. And now you say, okay, I'm going to define, and I'm going to give an answer now, not in 2 years for sandboxes or 3 years, right? So nobody wants to kill it, right? So, but I guess you need to put some requirements and constraints in that case, right? So what would you do for the developers, right? Now we're not talking about teachers, right? We're talking about developers. You address your requirements to the developers. What kind of things are you going to talk about? I'm not asking for formulations. I'm asking for kinds of things you want to ask for.
Purpose first, the purpose of the technology.
Okay, well, the purpose, personalization, improving education, they will write all the nice words. Yeah. For sure.
In more detail. And also, well, so which data it gathers, it will give us a nice overview of the.
Yeah, they will tell you something about data for sure. Yeah. So we have you have again Ekaterina. Thank you for that. Who's saying ethical audit during implementation?
Yes.
So this is typically called ethics check in the European language.
Yes.
Ethics check or ethics review. Yeah. I think you can speak, right?
Yes, I can speak. I think that it's the best decision, so we can follow every step of this project, how it keep all ethical promises.
Yeah. So let's have an ethics check. My question to you now: what are you going to check? Yeah. Here we go.
For damage, obviously, and it can be the psychological damage. It can be damage in the social connections. Maybe the students don't know how to interact with each other, with the teacher. And as the AI developer or designer of the system, then it could imply having feedback systems. But it's not only on the developer's desk.
Interesting. So you are a real utilitarian. You're really want an evaluation of costs and benefits, right? So so when you say I want to manage to measure damage and to evaluate damage, that's a very interesting way to say this. Okay, we're going to allow for this project, we're going to put some checks, and we want to do the cost benefit analysis, right? So please provide, this is what the AI Act calls risk management framework with risk analysis and all of these things, right? So that's one thing. I agree that this is important. I don't think this is the only thing to do, but I agree that definitely you need some kind of cost benefit, some kind of risk analysis within this. Mireille, maybe? Yeah.
That we should ask for the consent, maybe of students. Maybe
of whom?
Parents.
Students, they're minors. How are you going to ask for consent?
Huh? The parents.
Ah, interesting. Finally, we have this word. I was waiting for this.
And then we should have a plan B if people don't want to enter this experimental program.
Right. So, well, one of the keywords, and thanks, Mireille, for that, is parents. We've done 20 minutes of discussion. Anybody talked about parents the first time, you see? Yeah, we had parents at some point at the beginning, right. But the role of parents here in the responsibility framework is also very important. And what exactly is going on with the parents? Are they included also in the dialogue interface of the AI system or not? Is it just the student who is talking to the AI system, or is it the parents can actually, oops, yeah, now I don't need a sound anymore, sorry. So another very interesting point to check. Okay, well, let's conclude this. So what are you going to do? What you're going to do if you are evaluating this project, and I think many people in this room are ethics evaluators for the Commission, is of course you're going to put some checks. You're going to probably put an ethics advisor or an ethics board for sure, but you probably will also issue requirements. And the requirements are not addressed to the school or the city council. The requirements are addressed to the developers who need to implement interfaces, consent forms, various controls, metrics, and so on. So in reality, what you're going to do is you're going to have 25 requirements, plus an ethics board, plus a check, right? So this is a whole thing to write up when you're doing an ethics evaluation. All right, so as time is flying, we're going to move to the next exercise. Now, but you see the difficulty of this kind of exercise when you're doing this. But now we're going to do an even more difficult exercise, or maybe as difficult if you like. So knowing that these kinds of ethics evaluations are very complex, and when you have a conversation with the developers, just as an advisor, you can be raising all of these different questions, and then the developer says, so what do I do with that? And you say, okay, well, it's your job to decide what you do with that, right? I'm just asking questions. But when you're doing an ethics evaluation in a European project, then actually you are engaging the responsibility of the European Commission. So it's the same thing in any ethics committee. You engage the responsibility of the organization. So you cannot just say, I'm asking questions, you guys need to decide, right? You also need to think whether the decision is adequate, whether maybe the questions are so complex and serious that you would rather not let it go at all. And I have a project for you here. So if you look at the handouts, sorry, for people who are online, maybe you can just listen to the discussion for the moment. To evaluate complex projects, we have created another training in the RX project. And this training is a 3-hour training on how you evaluate projects as ethics experts. So we're going to do this in the remaining 30 minutes with you. It begins with a lecture that maps major themes, major problems, and this particular training is on AI ethics in healthcare. So we will have then, after the lecture, which I'm not giving to you here, we will have several exercises. And the exercises are complex. You will just have one exercise. Normally it's 3 exercises. And in order to go through this exercise, what we have done is that we have condensed more or less Altai. Of course, you can't really condense Altai, but we have done a 2-page checklist instead of 23, I think, pages. So this is a 2-page checklist. You have it before you on the kinds of questions that the experts need to ask themselves when they are analyzing the project. And they also get other materials which you guys are not getting right now because you're all specialists, right? So they also get this. They get a glossary. And I'm not showing you the glossary. They get a 1-page glossary with main terms. And what they are asked to do, this is the structure of the checklist. We're going to look at that. It has 8 chapters, 8 sections, with a lot of questions grouped under these 8 titles. And the job of the evaluators is, of course, to identify which questions are relevant, and usually everything is relevant, or almost everything is relevant. But the hard part of the job is to identify which of them are really serious and complex. So you're not going to send 150 questions to the PI of the project, right? So you need to choose somehow which ones are really the key ones that they need to work on. And this is the difficult part. So, So we're going to work on this with you now. And then I will say a few words in conclusion at the end. So here's the checklist and here's the project. Please take 3 minutes to read the project. It's a project about the use of AI in psychiatry as a follow-up application at home. They go home from hospital, psychiatric hospital, and they get an app. And you're talking to the developers of the app. This is a very short summary of the project. Please read it. Do you need another minute or you're done? Of course, in real life, we usually tell people, okay, take 5 minutes, take a pen, read it with a pen, underline, the things that you find. And this is a very short summary. It's a normal project, as you know, is going to be 30, 45, 150 pages, whatever you have, right? So a lot of these questions will not have answers in this very short summary. Okay, are we done? So let's go together as a group. We're a very big group here. Normally you do this in groups of 5 people. You don't want to go beyond 5 or something. If you want a handout, sir, there are handouts over here.
Is it possible to have this
Yeah, I can, on the screen for the others, it's complicated because I need this on the screen. Yeah, well, okay, well, it's gonna be not very easy, but let me try, I don't know. All right, so let's start. We'll probably do in the order, but just to be on the same page, let's start with section 1. What is the AI system doing here? Yes, the question on the chat. This is a summary, that's correct. It's 1 page like this. I'm not showing a full project, I'm just showing a 1-page summary. But you can at least get some idea, hopefully. I don't know how many people are online. 14, right? Okay. Right. So people in the room, here's a checklist. Can you look at section 1? Of course, many of these questions will not have an answer, but they are developing or using or both. What are they doing with the AI system?
Both.
Both, right? Interesting here, right? So they're developing a system, but also clearly they are probably having some practitioners who will be using this, right? So we need to look at both development and use here. We cannot ignore the use. The use will happen, very often you hear, use will happen after the project, so it's not your role here. You're just addressing technology readiness level 5, okay, out of 9. So no point talking about the use. No, here you need to think about the use. Okay, that's an important point. How about 1E? Will the AI system be used or operated for patients, healthy subjects, vulnerable groups? What do you think?
Vulnerable.
Huh?
Vulnerable people.
Yeah, they're definitely vulnerable, don't you think so? Yeah, they are psychiatric patients. So that requires extra care, vulnerable groups, all right. Well, let's now go through some of the technical modules. Okay, section 2. Does the AI system use supervised, non-supervised learning? Is there generative AI? What do you think? Huh? Unsupervised. So no annotators, no labeling. They say it clearly, unsupervised machine learning. Okay. If it's unsupervised, 2B, are there measures to ensure explicability? Yeah. Is it what? Yeah, unsupervised or self-supervised are kind of synonyms. Yes, indeed. Yeah, yeah. So unsupervised is an old term which we don't really use today anymore. We say usually today we say more self-supervised rather than unsupervised. Yeah, well, that's a good question. What about ground truth here? How do they evaluate? Like, what's the? Is there any ground truth? Huh?
This is why I would separate unsupervised and
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the question is not what is the technical name, right? I don't care about technical name. Well, right, I care, of course, but right now the question is, if it's self-supervised or unsupervised, both of them, what kind of ethical questions are you going to ask, right? So 2B, explicability measures, anything? What do you think about explicability measures? Mm-hmm. So sounds like they have actually thought about it a little bit. Are you happy with that?
That receives feedback, not the system. I see nothing about explicability there.
Yeah, so the patient is using the app at home, okay? And they receive feedback in plain language.
It's very unclear how the system receives feedback, or the designer of the system.
What? How the system receives, how the designer receives feedback?
I mean, how the patients can give feedback about the system.
Uh-huh. So you probably want to ask them to design some kind of evaluation system and feedback, right? So of course, one page doesn't have everything. They cannot tell you everything. So let's move on. Explicability, we have found some elements, but it's an interesting question whether you as ethics experts are going to be happy with that or you want more. Because remember, they are building their explicability with a language model. It says it right in the text.
But, sorry, but when I understand explicability, it would be more about why did the system give that feedback to the patient? It just says the patient will receive feedback. You don't know about what, but it's not feedback about why the system makes recommendations.
Well, the explicability of the outputs and explicability of the system itself are two different kinds of things. And also explicability here is the explicability for whom. So the explicability for the patient probably means what? Like, can the patient understand, or does the patient know what has caused the output? Which ones for you is ethically important? Does the patient understand the message, or does the patient know what has caused this output? There are two kinds.
I mean, from the text, it's more that the system makes a decision, and then the user explains the impact of that decision on the patient. So it's.
So I would say why the system has given this or that output is important for the doctor, but for the patient, what is important is to understand what the system has said. Right? The patient is not a doctor, is not a medical doctor. Whereas for the doctor, you need to provide some kind of explicability to understand, for the doctor to understand how that system is working with the patient. So the explicability for whom is another big question. All right, so last point on for two, and then we'll move on to other things. What about this language model here? It says, okay, we're going to interpret the results in plain language, because the results are probably just some numbers inside the model. We're going to interpret them in plain language using an external LLM. Are you guys happy with that? What do you want to ask for? Yeah, Mireille. Okay, yeah, let's start with Mireille.
External LLM. What is the data protection?
That's coming in the next chapter. Very good. Yeah. So what is external? Like how much data actually travels out? What's going on? Is it on the edge device? Is it in some controlled medical cloud? Is it, I don't know what, ChatGPT or God knows what? So the external story and privacy is a huge question. Okay. More remarks about this? Yep.
External, how do they guarantee they can fine-tune it?
Yeah. And also what happens with reproducibility and all of these things, you're right, but responsibility. It's an external model. They're not responsible for this. So they're creating a system which is using an element. Can they be accountable for it? So what happens with this? We'll see this later. You had a remark about this? Yeah. You're bringing, yeah, but it's a model that's been trained outside. Yeah. Yeah. So this is typically the kind of question for Article 9 of the AI Act. If you have a general purpose AI model, not system, model provider, and you are building your system using a GPI model, who is responsible for what? And the AI Act doesn't give a simple solution to that. And there is no simple solution, of course. So the question of shared responsibility between you building a system using a model provided by a provider of GPI models is a big question that for the moment we don't know how to solve it in one way. So you've probably heard that there is such a thing called AI Liability Directive, which has just been more or less resurrected by the current Hungarian presidency of the European Union. But for about 3 years, this directive has been just in some drawers. So who is responsible for what is a rather unclear issue. And definitely you will ask as an ethics evaluator to define responsibilities. You will probably ask them to propose some accountability framework by speaking to lawyers or things like this, right? You can't do it yourself, but you will ask for it. Let's go to section 3. This is very classic. You all know everything about data, right? But how about 3D? Anything we want to do with 3D? Are privacy by design technical measures considered? So you as evaluators, are you going to ask them for privacy by design? How are you going to deal with that? Any ideas? You guys are good ethics experts, right? So.
In point A, it's written that collected data will be made available to mental health practitioners. So it's not so much privacy by design.
Which point, sorry?
The point 1.
A.
At the end,
yeah.
Collected data will be made available to mental health practitioners. Privacy by design is not perfect.
Okay, so interesting question about privacy by design, which a lot of ethics experts don't understand fully. Of course, you want to ask them, but it will have a trade-off in terms of efficiency. So a lot of ethics experts say, oh, guys, you should make sure that everything is maximally secure and privacy is maximally protected and so on. And people often do in different medical projects, especially federated learning. Have you heard about federated learning techniques? When data stays with the data owner and your model travels to get trained. Other techniques are, there is also something, some other techniques, whatever they are. Anyway, very often ethics evaluations impose these kinds of techniques, and then the PI comes back and says, this will reduce the efficacy of my system if I do that. I will not be able to get enough data for learning, or my learning will not be good enough. So something that we as ethics experts tend to forget is that imposing a lot of measures for one value will probably lead to a tension with another value. So again, this is all about tensions between values, efficacy versus privacy. How much privacy can you have to keep your efficacy? This is especially true for radiology. Not this kind of project, but in radiology. All right, so time is flying. I want to actually go through the 4 remaining ones quickly with you. We're not looking at all of this, it's impossible. Bias and fairness. Any comments on bias and fairness? I'm sure you will have a lot. Right, so here is a question for you. What do you think is serious and complex here. Are you going to ask them to measure how biased their data sets are on which they're doing training? Is it a serious, complex question that you need to inject in your evaluation? What do you think? Like, do you see that there will be real discrimination as a consequence? Yeah. What do you think?
I think there are fairness issues at several levels. Already, if it's in natural language, there are different ways to express oneself, depending on your culture, your accents, if it's voice interaction. And then the groups of patients are obviously a very peculiar groups that are a priori not considered in the external LLM that is not designed based on this group of patients.
Right.
And within the group of patients, you have different kinds of conditions.
Okay, so sounds like you want to pinpoint fairness issues to them based on the way people use language. You will say you will need to measure whether your data set is biased or not, depending on various types of language use, because I'm not sure about what kind of fairness by which criterion we're talking about. But I'll come back to this maybe. Yeah, let's listen to Rebecca now.
There's going to be bias in terms of who is giving the data. We know that different groups are going to be disproportionately diagnosed with a major depressive disorder, for example, based on gender, cultural background. We know that the symptoms are going to be expressed differently depending on these demographic factors. It's highly unlikely that the data set that they're going to train on, which it says is going to be based on a patient's association. Is this a private or a public healthcare system? People who have access to private healthcare are going to be a different population.
So very standard, right? Yeah. Very standard kinds of biases in the data set, and you want them to measure them. Okay. Yes. All right, I have a question for you. Do you see anything specific to the psychiatric use? We've talked about standard biases in the data sets, and there should be, but standard biases, I'm pretty sure they kind of know that you need to balance your data set or whatever. I mean, probably if you had a full project, not one page, there would have been something on standard biases. Do you see anything specific? I see at least two separate specific issues here on bias and fairness. Take a mic, please. We can't hear you.
The wearable sensors.
Oh, yeah. By the way, that's another question. Good question. Yeah. So all sorts of sensors and data collection from media, social media, and questionnaires and so on. Yeah. So this is a huge privacy issue, but I'm not sure it's a fairness issue, is it? Yeah.
I think maybe it's related to the fact that the recurrence of the illness. So that
recurrence of the illness.
So it said that people get much more. The chances of a depressive episode increases. Right. So you might get more information from people.
So how's your moral imagination going? Any other issues? Should I give you a couple more, if you like? So we've just talked about language. Can I go back to language? Oh, you want to add something? Before I go back to language, please add something.
No, just a question. So, because you were referring to those biases in the sample, would it be actually acceptable, being aware of those biases, to limit then the application, to develop a tool and limit the application to the subpopulation that is matching that bias? Or would that create another dilemma?
No, they will probably not have enough market. They will say, if you limit it this way, we don't have market. We want like world market in all countries or something.
No, but would it be ethically acceptable? And say, okay, if there is a bias in the data sample towards whatever the weird population that we had yesterday, and then we have a solution for the weird population, is that okay?
You can try, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, as an ethics expert, you can definitely say, okay, I want to suggest this kind of recommendation or requirement. I'm pretty sure that it will not pass as a requirement. It will probably pass as a recommendation, just from experience. But I don't think, one of the big problems, I will talk about this later, is it seems that you are sort of stepping on the scientific or market side of the project. And one of the big issues for ethics evaluators is, please guys evaluate ethics, but don't evaluate science. Where is exactly the border between the two, right? And that's not easy. Okay, can we go back to language and move on? we just talked about markets for this app. So imagine there's going to be probably a big market, maybe all of Europe. Don't you think that there is a bias problem with a large language model in different languages? It doesn't speak languages in the same way, right? So it's probably in English, at least it's best in English, as most models are. But these people don't speak English, right? They're in different European countries. They speak Hungarian, French, German, and so on. How about the performance of the model in those languages? Is it biased or not? Is it equal, or maybe some languages will work better and some languages will not work at all, right? A language issue, okay? Anybody sees another language issue in psychiatry? It's a specific psychiatry question. Psychiatric treatment, yeah.
Related to hallucinations as well, but I mean, there's very specific terminologies and criteria that have to be met when you're like diagnosing the prevalence of symptoms and things like that. If you
and they are using, remember, an external large language model. It's probably already been aligned. An external model, okay? It's probably already been aligned not to go on touchy things. You know how alignment works? The model will not even talk to you about things that are too touchy. They're using an external NLM. Imagine it has already been aligned by Meta or I don't know whom, or Mistral. It will not even talk about these things. It will refuse. Right? You see because the specific language of psychiatry is sometimes even toxic, at least problematic. Sometimes they use terms that are classified as toxic terms. And the model will not want to go there. So how come they are going to even use an external model? Who's doing the alignment? Are you using an unaligned model at all? You see, another kind of question here. So there are kinds of general bias questions, right? That we'll always have. And then there are specific ones that we, with our moral imagination, are sort of inventing about this particular use case. And that's the job of the ethics evaluator, to sit down and unleash your imagination and say, okay, what's going on here? Maybe there's something interesting. All right, cybersecurity is Claude's favorite topic. Claude, you want to take a microphone and tell us all about cybersecurity? How about somebody hacks your app and starts giving you strange advice, right? How do you make sure this doesn't happen? But it is a very important topic. Let me go to 7. I know we need to conclude soon, just 10 minutes left. Let me go to 7. We'll skip 6. We've talked about responsibility already. What is going on with the usual bioethics principles of beneficence and non-maleficence? What are you going to request in this case? Yeah, well, this was also in 6, right? So how much supervision, and that's why 6 and 7 are kind of close here. Are you gonna tell them that they need to go to the doctor, like what, every week? Or are you going to ask for the doctor's supervision? But if you're asking for the doctor's supervision, then what's the point? Because there are not enough doctors in the world. And the app exactly should be replacing the doctor. What do you think you will be reasonably asking for in this case? Yeah. An emergency mechanism. Something happens, like there can be intervention if we use it. Yeah. So typically in this case, and that's very, very classic in medical applications, you ask for thresholds beyond which the app or the system or whatever it is will just call a medical professional, a human. So somehow they need to tell us about the kinds of situations when the app will not give an output to the patient and will tell them to go and see a professional doctor. But this needs to be defined, right? So it's part section 6, part section 7. But in section 6 and 7, there is also the non-maleficence aspect. And here is a question. Imagine you fund this. You are an expert for the European Union. You fund this. And then somebody is using this and they commit a suicide. Yeah, I mean, psychiatric patients, unfortunately, sometimes commit suicides. What's going on with responsibility? Who's responsible? Can you be, can the provider of the app, in your opinion, you are not responsible as an ethics expert, okay? But can the European Commission be responsible? Is the European Commission liable for this death as a funder of the project? Is the AI provider liable? What do you do with that? Are you asking for some kind of consent to make sure that they are never liable? Yeah.
Again, I would assume this is a medical product. So when medical products are being released to the market, there is specific regulations on accountability, liability. The fact that it's an AI product doesn't make it that much different from a false color coding in a CT scanner and so on. So ultimately,
Yes.
or whatever in the semi-automatic robot that is used for operations, if that one malfunctions, ultimately, I was talking to a lawyer recently about all those autonomous systems, and they said basically it's product regulations, ultimately.
So, yeah, you want to add something?
I won't
Please.
go into detail on that part because, of course, the AI Act already solves this in part. I mean, beyond what you already said about the directives that are coming out. But I would say that this also shows the importance of the auditability of the system. That will play a really important role in the assessment and the attribution of responsibility in those cases arising in this kind of diffuse responsibility.
Yeah. So, directive, yeah, Claude.
Yes, on a different topics, but
Wait.
like...
Can we finish with this?
Okay, sure.
Yeah, maybe. So you're right. Directive, I think 359 on medical devices. This is a medical device, remember, and you're completely right. Just let them finish. Yeah. Okay. So the directive on medical devices fully applies, and you're also right. The AI Act classifies this as high risk, and it actually says we should be at some point developing harmonized certification mechanisms between the medical device directive and the AI Act. And this doesn't exist yet. So for the moment, the only thing we're coming to you, for the moment, the only thing we can do on this is tell them, yes, the accountability framework is governed by the medical devices directive, but it's up to you guys to see how AI, because there is no certification for the moment. So for the moment, it's up to them to see how they comply with the medical devices directive and propose maybe some kind of legal framework. Again, what kind of legal framework? Probably something that the medical institution needs to adopt, give to the doctor, because the doctor is not liable for the patient dying, right? Never. But the doctor needs to know where exactly their human decision will come, their doctor's decision, so that the doctor can feel comfortable using this kind of thing. So in real life, the reason why these kinds of things are not really much used is, of course, the lack of accountability framework, but also because a lot of doctors don't want it. There is a lot of resentment among medical practitioners who don't want this kind of things. Claude, and then Rebecca. Yes.
Indeed, I like 7B.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the question of impact on the profession.
Yes, exactly. And I think that human autonomy should be understood also.
As autonomy of the doctors, of course, not just of the patients. Remember, there are several groups here. It's not just, humans are not only patients, humans are also doctors. There are several groups of humans here. Rebecca.
Yeah, I actually have a question because I'm not so sure what would distinguish this from just a psychiatric patient asking ChatGPT for psychological advice. And I mean, there are all of this safeguarding, of course, but you can still, and I have done this before, and it gives really terrible psychiatric advice. It will be like, oh, you're feeling anxious, and this stems from your traumatic childhood, and you should, like, it really is bad. But if someone was to like harm themselves as a result of ChatGPT, then they would not be held accountable. So is it that someone is making a profit of this app, but ChatGPT also makes a profit? Like, I actually don't know. I don't know enough about this topic.
So, of course, the only difference is that here it's given by the medical doctor to the patient when the patient leaves the hospital, right? So the responsibility chain is different. But if the patient decides to use ChatGPT on their own, then the responsibility will be probably not involve the medical institution at all. This will be just between the AI provider and the person, if the person commits, I don't want suicide, right? But the legal conditions that you accept when you start using ChatGPT today, because there was this famous episode in Belgium when somebody was chatting to GPT-3 a couple of years ago and then they committed suicide. So today, if you look carefully at the legal terms you accept when you're using all these models available online, they will remove responsibility from the provider for as much as possible. The question is it legal? And also another question is, what about the reputation effects? This is another kind of level. But I want to conclude with that and just in the last 5, maybe less, 3 minutes, okay, we have 3 minutes, tell you that you see how difficult the ethics evaluation exercise is. We had a lot of questions based on this checklist. It takes normally an hour to go through the checklist on just point by point after you have read the project. So you have your project, 35 or 45 pages, then you have the checklist, you go point by point, and then you start thinking, what is serious and complex? Am I gonna just send them all of these points? How do I select? And this is where it's difficult, you see? Very often, I have this word here. From today's practice, because a lot of experts are coming from bioethics and they don't know much about AI systems, very often they will overkill. They will ask for so many things that it's just not feasible. And that is the difficult part of it. How do we ask for something that can actually be done? And yes, of course, they need to be aware of all these issues. So maybe we're going to put the others in recommendations. But if you require 25 different things in ethics, they will never be able to do their project. So this is a difficult part. Another difficult part is legal versus ethical. So we've just talked about who is liable, what exactly is in the AI Act. And here, one of these components of this legal versus ethical dilemma is the question of research or use. So if it's research and the Act doesn't apply, you can have a lot of requirements saying Article 5, Article whatever, and then they will respond to you saying, this is research. The Act doesn't apply, full stop. So how do you deal with that, right? Another big problem for us as ethical evaluators. And the last question is scientific versus ethical evaluation. So of course, there is no clear frontier between science and ethics. Somehow we always tell them, okay, you have to have some metrics, okay, you have to have some evaluation, but if you go too far, they will come back and say, or the commission will come back and say, you can't do this. Every time you need to make it clear how this relates to ethics. If you're telling them, your LLM is not using languages in a similar way, some languages will be biased, you have not done your job yet. You need to explain how this is relevant for ethics. So every time you write something, you need to explain what about ethics is there, not just some scientific fact, right? And this is what makes the job difficult, but now you are all ready to become ethics evaluators, and you probably are already, and it's 12:30, so it's time for me to conclude. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Alexei.
I don't know if you maybe some